¿Qué lo que hay, mi gente? Welcome to Let's Hablar Solita podcast brought to you by Hablemos Productions. Vamos a hablar de todo sin filtro. Let's talk without a filter.
¿Qué lo que hay, mi gente? Welcome to Let's Hablar Solita podcast. It is your host, Maya Ladies Siete, here with you, and we have a very special guest. We have Monica. Monica is going to be talking about a topic that a lot of us tend to overlook, or at least we don't see the signs, and I'm going to explain that in just a moment. But I do want to let you all know that there is an actual act of legislation for this particular story. So today we're going to be talking, and this is a trigger warning, about DV, spousal abuse, partner abuse, the things that can happen when you don't speak up and when you don't see the signs of needing to get out. The Violence Against Women Act was introduced on June 20th, 1990, and has since helped many partners, domestic, spousal, and life partners in our country. So I do want to let you know you do have a right to be heard and seen. There are a lot of groups that are being affected, and it has now extended to those groups such as the LGBTQ+, the Black community, the Latino X community, the white community, and the Asian community. I do want to say I think that the Native American or Indigenous community is probably underreported, and because that's a different legal system, essentially, we may not have those numbers. But enough of that. I want to talk about someone very special. I want to talk about Margarita. So, Moni, tell me your sister's story. Tell me exactly what was she like first.
Well, first, thank you for asking me to share her story. I enjoy any opportunity I have to speak of her. She was a very lovely soul. So my sister is a year and 3 months younger than me. We grew up together. We were raised as essentially twins. So everybody thought we were twins because my mom always dressed us up the same. My grandma would have to make a second dress if we found one because we both needed to be matching at all times. So I grew up with my sister throughout school. We were like this. Everybody knew us as Moni and Beba, never one by themselves, never Moni or just Beba. It was Moni and Beba. And we were best friends. We hung out in the same circle of friends. All her friends knew me, all my friends knew her. Elementary, we were just always together, obviously separate grades. But once we hit middle school and high school, that's when like all our friends merged. We made so many friends in our community. And I think my sister was just someone who was so bubbly. She was a little more shy than me. So she was like my partner in crime. I came up with ideas and she's like, okay, yeah, sure, let's do that. So she would follow me everywhere. She'd be like, okay, yeah, let's go. Then when we got into like high school, we all start learning about ourselves and we all start getting our own personalities, kind of seeing what we want to do with life. And she was more the voice of reason. I am more of an emotional reactor. I react on my emotions. So she was always the calm in the storm for me. She would always be like, well, you really shouldn't be doing that. And I'm like, well, I have to. She's like, no, you don't. So she was like my calm. Um, so we grew up in a very stable home. My parents were amazing parents together. I'm the oldest of four. And so yeah, just growing up in a very stable home, my parents were like the ideal relationship. They respected each other so much. So I know that me and my sister took our values of what we wanted in a relationship from my parents. Um, but then like our whole world changed when we did reach the age of like 16, 17. Again, I'm an emotional reactor. So I went off and I got pregnant. So I got pregnant. My sister was like, well, now what do we have in common, girl? Like, what did you do? So
You're like, I
that
changed the
was,
friend group.
yeah, it's like, hold on.
Best friend.
I don't know what to do here. Yeah. So she was like, she started hanging out with her friends who weren't having these type of responsibilities. And then at the same time, out of nowhere to us, from like us looking into my parents' relationship, they started having problems and they decided they got a divorce. And that definitely broke up our family. My mom left, and my sister was very close with my mom. She left with her, and me and my dad stayed back in Nebraska, and my brother stayed with me, and my little sister went with my mom. So we literally got divided, and it was really hard because during that time, going through like parent separations, we're going through all those emotions, and then she's in a different state. She went to Texas. I stayed in Nebraska. So it was just a very, very blurry to me because I guess I like zoned it out a whole year after postpartum and everything. It was just a lot. So me and my sister kind of separated a little bit, and that's when I don't know, we just felt like there was a lot of distance between us.
Mhm.
Eventually, she did move back for a little bit, and that's when she moved in with me and my now husband. And
Mhm.
that's kind of when we reconnected again. She left Texas, she came back to Nebraska, but I had a child still, so she was out partying, she was out living life, she was like the life of the party. She was that responsible friend. I was a very bad drinker back at that time.
Oh my
Like, nobody could tell me to stop. So I'd be taking shots and my sister would be pouring me shots and stuff like that. But my friends would be like, you need to cut her off. Like, she needs no more drinks. And she's like, don't worry about it. It's just pop. She doesn't even realize the difference. So a
oh
homegirl was taking care of me, serving me pop shots. And I'm over here thinking it's still alcohol.
oh no, your sister busted on me.
Yeah, she
I
took
do.
care of me. Yeah, so she knew how to control herself. So she's like, I need to control her. Let me give her some water.
Yeah, I
So
did
I
that.
knew I was safe with her. Um, so yeah, she was doing her thing. We were living life, kind of me and my husband and my relationship at that point, boyfriend. And then my sister was out just living life. And during that time, um, she ended up reconnecting with a one of our family members' best friend. So she was like, "Oh, I always thought you were cute," because I know that he had came over one time for Christmas or something like that,
Mhm.
and we had a picture of him with my cousin in our kitchen. And I never knew my sister thought he was cute. I just were like, "Oh my God, they're teenagers. They're a lot older than us, whatever." But I guess she told me she started talking to him on MySpace back in MySpace days.
Oh
And
wow,
I know, miss those days. Great
nostalgia.
times. I know. I just aged myself. Dang. No, just kidding.
Well, both of us, because I was on Facebook too.
No, great times. So yeah, they reconnected on MySpace, and then they changed the back into Facebook and all that stuff.
Mhm.
So she tells me his that Rogelio, which is the guy she was starting to talk to, that he was in California, he was in the Marines, he was 6 years older than her, I believe 6 or 7 years older. And I think what caught my sister's attention of him was one, the fact that he was older, because my dad was 6 years or is 6 years older than my mom. The fact that he was in the Marines, which to her, it showed that he was a responsible person, knew what he wanted in life, that he was willing to sacrifice, or defend our country.
Mhm.
So just that type of respect really caught my sister's attention. So she was just head over heels for this guy. Like, I think as girls, a lot of us try to look for qualities in our partners that maybe our father had, if we had a good father. And I know that I personally did that. I know my sister did that. So I know for a fact that that's what caught her attention. So I was just like, you know what? Go for it. Like, he seems chill. Like, that's fine. He was willing to fly out and be with my sister during, his times off. So he would fly back and forth between here and California to come visit my sister. And also he has family here.
Mhm.
So, when I first met him, he was very like quiet and stuff like that. But my sister was so giddy. Like, she was just like, oh my gosh, he's finally here. I'm so excited to see him. Like, she was just so in awe of this guy. Um, I really didn't get to know him so much. I didn't really get to see a lot of the relationship when he was here. Again, I had my boyfriend, I had my son, and I was focused on me, and she was out with her friends with him and stuff like that. So I really didn't get to see that dynamic, but I do remember my first impression of him, and he was very cocky, very arrogant, very like, I'm better than you type vibe. So I didn't per se like his personality too much from the beginning. Just because I don't care for people like that. They make me feel uncomfortable for whatever reason, so I just avoid. Um, and so, yeah, that was just, I remember that was my first impression. That was Juan, which is my now husband. That was his first impression of him. So we just kind of left it at that. But my sister was happy, and we kind of just went with the flow.
Mhm.
Shortly after, that was in January of 2011 or 12. I'm not even going to try to remember dates because there's just so much. But
You're good.
there was in January. Well, shortly after that, not even 3 months into their dating situation, they started, well, 3 months before that, like let's say 2 months into it, they started talking about marriage. And I was like, why? Like, why are you guys trying to get married? I've been with Juan for like 4 years and we haven't even gotten married. What do you mean?
Right.
I was like, what are you guys talking about? But I specifically remember my sister was saying, well, it's because, he is in the Marines, and when you get married, you get more benefits. You get more benefits for your spouse. Like, I just vividly remember her saying, it's like, he would get extra money, but I also will get like money because it's like, I miss you money. And she said it like that. She's like, I miss you money because they're so far away if I'm not able to live there with him. So, I was just like, you know what? I feel like you're rushing into it. There's no need for that. Like, get to know the guy. And she was like, no, she's like, we're going to get married. And she did ask me and Juan to be her witness. And I was like, you know what? Okay, so I'm not going to change your mind, but I'm not going to go behind my parents' back. Do they know? And then she's like,
Oh my
no. She's like, no, they don't know. I'm like, well, I will be your witness, but you have to tell mom and dad. I'm like, you need to
Yeah.
tell them. So I guess that she did talk to my parents. I don't know too much about like the conversation with my dad. I know my mom was like, you don't need to move in with him right now. Like, or you don't have to get married. Try moving in with him. Like, I support if you want to move in with him, like live together, see if this is truly what you want. Like, it hasn't even been 3 months, And my
Mhm.
sister was just like, yeah, I'll think about it. But no, homegirl went and got married. So there we were. He flew out. It was just Juan, myself, my sister, and Rogelio. We went to the courthouse, and to me, I remember it just looks like a storage room. There was a long table, storage boxes everywhere, and a judge, and they got married. And I was just like, okay, that was so unromantic. What the heck? I thought we were supposed to have these huge weddings.
Right. Especially after, because you did share with me a photo, like quinceañera. Like you
Oh,
have
yeah.
these big, mind you, anyone who isn't Latino, quinceañera is basically like a sweet 16. Okay. So it's,
Hmm.
but instead of just these thin dresses, you wear these poofy dresses. They look like ball gowns, almost
Hmm.
princessy. So for her to have a storage room wedding, during a quinceañera, hello, you have to have the big ugly dress and make all of the bridesmaids
Exactly.
have ugly dresses that they're not gonna like. That's the point.
Exactly.
Like,
Exactly. Like we were so like into parties growing up. We were always going to quinceañeras, weddings, bautizos, everything. And our quinceañera ended up being together because my parents are like, I cannot save up for another gasto in a year and a half. Like there's no way. You guys either do it together or nobody's getting one. So I was like, all
right.
right. So we did it together. We had me, my sister, and then I had 7 chambelanes and damas on my side. She had 7 damas and chambelanes. So that was 14 couples, plus me and my couple, plus my sister and her couple. Like, it was a lot. And the salon that we rented out for that is like one of the biggest ones at that time. And
Mhm.
that thing got packed. Like, literally, in a quinceañera, you have your main table for your court and yourself. I never even got to sit in it. Our chairs got taken away because we had no more chairs, no more tables. Like, that thing was packed. So for my, like how exactly you said, go from this extravagant quinceañera to a storage room wedding. Like, are you kidding?
Where now everybody fits at the table, but the table is
Yeah.
not finely decked out. Okay.
Yeah. So that was that. And I mean, I guess at that point, my sister was when she made a decision, she made a decision, and that was that. She wasn't, and it's, my sister was known for saying, like, I want to do things the right way. She always said it, like, if you're going to do something, do it the right way. So for her, if she was going to move in with this guy, she wanted to get married, I guess. I don't know. Whatever. That was her thought. And, so I don't know. I just feel like she just wanted, so we never really questioned once she made a decision because she put a lot of thought into it. So she had her reasons as to why she made her decision that
Mhm.
fast. But at that point, like me and my mom said, he is heavily influencing her thought process.
Mhm.
So, I mean, it is what it is. We got happy for her. She ended up staying here with me for a while. He went back to California and they were doing the back and forth thing. She would go visit him. He would come here and whatnot. Well, my sister took a lot to social media when it came to like explaining her emotions. So that's kind of how we knew if they were fighting, if they weren't fighting, if they were okay, kind of where her thought process was. She literally took Facebook as a diary. She wrote everything. And so, I think that's kind of back in the day. I feel like we all posted a lot of our emotions on there because Facebook's like, what are you thinking? And we're like, oh, well,
Yeah.
I'm thinking that. So
Yeah.
we went to Facebook. I'm very much guilty. I cringe to those statuses. I cannot. So I feel like she really took into that. So that was kind of like a roller coaster, especially at such a young age, in your early 20s. Well, kind of teens, 18, 19, 20. You are very, you don't know yet how to handle emotions. You don't know yet how to navigate the world. So we're very impressionable at that age
Mhm.
still. And I feel like with all those statuses, it was like, oh, we don't like him. Oh, we like him. Oh my God, he did it. Oh no, he didn't. Or, stuff like that. So it was a very, looking back at it, it was a very weird experience to have because I didn't know the guy. I just knew him based off of what my sister would tell me. And she wouldn't really express in person if they were fighting or stuff like that. She would just like, oh, he's going to come see me or he's going to do this. We would just know based off of her statuses. So with that, then eventually, I think my mom met him during a Christmas, I believe in 2012. And she came. It was the first Christmas we have spent together with my siblings and my mom, not my dad, but with my mom. And Rogelio came to visit. And during that time, we have Christmas video footage that I was looking through, and he was just so standoffish. He was just like he didn't care to be there. He was just acting like he was tired. I get it. Yeah, maybe you just flew in. I forgot exactly what day
Hold
he flew
on.
in,
I think
but
you
there was no
crashed
effort.
real quick. Hold on. Okay, go.
So like there was no effort on his end, like trying to be involved with the family. So it was just a very weird thing to look at. It was just very uncomfortable to look back at. I do remember that he would go to the room during our Christmas celebration to go sleep. Like he just didn't want to be around with us. It was so weird. So we just, again, brushed it off. Like my sister was like, no, we're fine, we're fine. And then eventually, my sister announced that she was pregnant. And so now we're like, oh dear God, now she's pregnant. So we're like, oh no. Like, I mean, obviously we're happy for her, but like then you start thinking like, oh, how are they going to do it? They live apart, they're not living together. How is this situation going to happen? And she told us that she was going to be moving to California. So by New Year's they were traveling to California and she was going to go move with him. So up to this point, now there I remember my sister's like, oh my gosh, now we're going to have babies in common, we're back on track.
Yeah, but yours came way later.
I know. I was like, yeah, well, mine is like 4 years old now, 5, 6. I don't even know. I'm like, but okay. But she's like, yeah, now I get to be a mom. Now we're back on track. Like you have your partner, I have my husband. You have your son. Now I'm gonna have a baby. So now we're back on track to being, kind of having our lives the same. So I was just like, okay. Yeah, so I was just like, okay, cool. So I do remember her calling me a lot while she was in California, but it was more of like her expressing to me how happy she was to be a wife and to take care of her home and, how excited she was to learn about how big the baby was, like growing and all this stuff, just like mom things and wife things. We would literally call each other, because FaceTime was new. So we would call each other on FaceTime and just set it up so we were washing dishes together. We wouldn't really be saying much, but we're like, let's clean up the house, and we'd be cleaning the house together. So it was like, it was, I felt like she was going to be pretty okay adjusting to life that way. I mean, we had talked about us flying over there, to visit her and stuff like that. But then besides all the Facebook statuses that would come, about fights, I remember Rogelio had called me, and he never calls me. We never really talk, nothing. And he had called me and he asked me if I had spoke to Beba. And I was like, well, no, what do you mean? And he told me that he had gotten home from work and that she wasn't home. And so then I'm freaking out. I'm calling her because she's pregnant. And like by this point, she was maybe 6, 7 months pregnant. And I try to call her. She doesn't answer her phone. And I'm like thinking, oh my God, like, how am I going to get a hold of her? California is huge. Like she knows nobody over there. And we have a lot of cousins and family in California, but they're hours away. It's not like a small state where, oh yeah, okay, here, but they're hours away. So I'm just like, texting them. I mean, I'm like, hey, has maybe she reached out to you asking to come see you or something? And no answer. So it was the longest night of my life trying to think of where is she? Where is she? She's not answering. And back then, we don't have location apps. We don't have tracking apps. We don't have none of that. So it's like, oh my gosh. She eventually reached out to me the next morning and she told me that
She left probably when he came back. It was probably what, 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, maybe.
Probably around that time.
So she was gone for hours.
So from what I don't know what time she left during the day, but by the time he got back, let's say 3 or 4, she was gone all night, overnight, and she probably didn't call me till like 7, 8, 9 in the morning.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so it was like a whole night thing. So
freaking out.
yeah, like you have no idea. Yeah, and there's like no other app, like there's nothing. Like right now, if somebody were like, oh, okay, hey, yeah, I'm not answering, but you can easily maybe go check where they're at or whatever, depending on who it is. But back then, no, there was no way, no way. And states away, I'm in Nebraska, she's in California. I'm like, come on. So it was very scary. So when she finally did call me, she told me that she had to leave the house and she got a hotel. and she's been in a hotel room. And I was like, well, why? What happened? Why did you have to leave? And that's when she started to explain to me that her and Rogelio got into a fight. And I don't 100% remember the exact situation, but I recall her saying, I think he was drunk. I'm not sure, but that he was drinking and they got into an argument and he started to get aggressive. So she went to the room and tried to lock the door, but he got in there and he started choking her. And so I don't know how she managed to get away. She went to the bathroom and she kind of stayed there until he went back to the living room and she locked the door and basically waited for him to leave for work the next day. And that scared her so much that she had to leave and get a hotel. Like, it made her get to that point.
Mm-hmm.
That was intense for me. Me and my sister never, like, we grew up in a non-violent home. We never in our dreams, like, that was a novela type thing, like Rosa de Guadalupe, kind of
Yeah.
like Los Casos de la Vida Real, you know, like stuff like that. That's where we would see that. We wouldn't see it in our household or anybody in our circle of friends, of family, like nobody. That was foreign to us.
Yeah,
And
because you
so,
said that you had a like a good family dynamic, right? Like before your parents' divorce, they seemed seemingly happy in their marriage and things were good. So you would assume that that's what someone is looking for in a potential partner. But
mhm,
I wonder if those, because teenagers, it's a very, very delicate year. So when your parents got divorced, I wonder if her perception of ideal husband had changed because there was no longer that figure a constant in the house. You know what I mean?
mhm, mhm,
And of course, Rogelio could be very manipulative, like as many abusers are. They come off a certain way at first, but then you
yeah,
said he was cocky, which we did not hear in the American
documentary,
Monster
right?
documentary. But I know that that to me would explain why he was in the room. Because if he was very cocky, he doesn't want to associate with you. You're beneath him type of feels.
Mhm,
But to think that you grabbed your pregnant wife, bro, like
yeah,
what are you doing? And I can see why she got
exactly,
scared because now she's it's not just her. Now she's got
yeah,
something growing inside of her. So
exactly.
she had to get out.
Exactly. And yeah, now that you say that, maybe during my parents' separation, something like kind of switched and her perception of her ideal partner. And maybe, I mean, that's for a whole nother episode, but like a lot of things did happen, during that time. So maybe that could have influenced the way she changed. But I know that my sister was a very committed person. She was very, well, first of all, she was very in love. I don't know what this guy, how he talked to her, what he said, but she was very, very much in love. And hold on, I'm thinking, okay. And then, so I think because of that, it's the first time that, he laid his hands on her from what I know. And I don't know, again, how much of a manipulator. Well, now I do know how much of a manipulator he was, but I'm pretty sure he sweet talked her and convinced her, hey, this will never happen again, or whatever the case is. But I do recall because my sister did take some time and she went to Texas and she stayed with my mom after that whole ordeal. Like, my sister was like, absolutely not. Like, that was scary. I'm not going to put myself in that position. She packed up and she left. She went to Texas. And I don't know how much time passed between her leaving and then Rogelio reaching out to her to apologize or whatever the case is. But he obviously did, because she went back to California, and that's where Christian was born. Christian was born September, so his birthday's coming up. So he was born there in California. He's like, Mom, that's what me and you have in common. I'm like, yeah, California, my guy. So yeah, so she was originally the plan was for me and my mom to fly out there, but back in the day, like, it was so difficult to try to fly or to try to travel. Like, it was so expensive. Like, you could say it is now, but it's more doable now than it was back then. And so we didn't make it. And so our plan B was to have me on a video call and just put me up on a table or something so I can just be there and watch and like talk to her or whatever. And he never called me. Like, it was up to Rogelio to call me to make sure that I was there. And he never, ever, ever called me or texted me. The next thing I knew, my sister sent me a picture of Christian and he was already born. Yeah. So I was like, what the heck? So I was just like, okay, fine. I got on the call with my sister, and so I was like, hey, how did it go? And she goes, it was the longest time of my life. Like, she goes, I cried. And it's so funny because when I gave birth to Damien, my oldest, I cried. And the minute, like, I was like in pain. And the minute my sister walked in the door, because she had to get picked up from school, she walked in and I started crying when I saw her. Like, I was like, oh, she's here. And my sister, she was crying and they're like, what can we do to help you? And she's like, I want my sister. And they're like, okay, we'll call her. She goes, she's in Iowa. So they're like, oh yeah, sorry, honey, we can't do anything.
Right.
So I was like, oh, us both crying for each other during labor.
Yeah. That speaks
But
to your connection though, because I feel like we all have our person. I know that my
mhm,
comadre is my person. She's the one that I
yeah.
go to when I'm mad, like when I'm really mad. I
Hmm.
can't see straight. I need help. Like I'm pissed off. I'm like blinded from everything, but it's just
Yeah,
my person. So that's very
exactly.
like your bond is very strong if that's your person.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's the person we're crying through. We're like, when we're in pain, we're crying, and I need her. So yeah, she
Yeah.
was most definitely my person. She was my everything. So Christian was born, and she was like, you know what? I'm gonna fly out to Nebraska. When he turns a month old, I will fly over there. So she did. She came into town. I got my picture with Christian when he was only a month old. I gave him his first bath. So she stayed with me for about a month. I know then that's the time that Rogelio's family would come over and meet Christian and stuff like that. As far as like my sister's relationship with her in-laws, it wasn't that great. I mean, that's also where I put up a wall towards his side of the family because they were mean to my sister. I mean, they questioned if Christian was Rogelio's and like they're like, is he really your son? And all this stuff. And his sisters were so mean to her. And so they just didn't get along, but my sister tried to make it work because she's married. That's now her baby's family. So she's like, we have to make it work. So she would have them over, and I have pictures of them on my couch with Christian. And, my sister was, again, that peacemaker, that like level of calm. So, yeah, so then after that, I mean, let me rewind a little bit. I did throw them a baby shower, and that was the first time I saw Rogelio after that incident in California. And he seemed normal. Like, he seemed normal, but overly excited, like overcompensating for something, like trying to prove that they're okay. So I'm just like, as long as he's not with an attitude, as long as he's not with a face, then I'm fine. Like, okay, like my sister's happy, and she asked, she kind of just dropped it and was like, okay, let's just move forward. So we did. We're just like, okay, maybe it truly is again, we don't know the patterns of someone who hurts other people. We don't know the patterns of a manipulator. We didn't grow up in that. So to us, we're like, okay, maybe it truly was an accident or a one-time thing. Like he's gonna learn, like he has a baby on the way. Like, okay, let's move forward. So that's what we did. We moved forward. Christian's now here, and they moved back to California. My sister's, constantly sending videos of Christian to us, like constantly posting pictures of him on Instagram and Facebook. So everything seems pretty chill and everything. And then Rogelio gets deployed overseas, and my sister goes to Texas, so she wouldn't have to be by herself. So she's at my dad's. Um, Again, there's fights here and there between them, arguments or whatever. But then I distinctly remember my sister called me so mad, like so mad. And I was like, what is wrong? She's like, Rogelio has been in the States for a week and he didn't tell me. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, yeah, he's back in California, back on base, and he has not told me. For me, he's still overseas.
Mhm.
And I was like, what do you mean? So she's like, yeah, I called him out. I was like, when were you going to tell me that my husband is back in California? And he was just like, oh, no, it's because I needed to take a week off and prepare myself for the responsibilities that I have now that I'm back. And he went to a Dodgers game. He went out to the bars. Like, he was living his single life. And that made my sister super mad.
Pissed off too. I don't get a break. Like I
I
got a baby,
know.
I got a whole ass baby, and I don't get a break.
Exactly. Like, when's my day off? When's
Right?
my whole day off? Like, I could not even a day. Like, come on. Yeah, it was intense. Like, I was upset. I was like in awe. Like, are you kidding me? Well, then my sister goes and posts that he sent her flowers and, whatever he said to her to, get her to forgive him. And sure enough, she did. Again, she's in love. I mean, right now, what wouldn't I forgive of my husband? When we love someone, we love them.
Yeah.
And when we have such a good heart, we try to see past a lot of people's bad qualities, I guess. And so my sister forgave him, and at that point, I guess he was gonna he was done with the military and they decided to move back. Well, then here when they moved back, there's like we live like in a town and then there's little farms around, like little small towns. So they moved out to to Rogelio's family's farm. And everything was fine. You know, my sister was getting her job. She had a job. He was going back to school. He was a basketball coach in middle school or high school. I think middle school. Everything was good. And then finally it got to the point where, you know, you start seeing little jealous remarks of Rogelio, like, oh, why are you going to wear that to work just to get people's attention and this and that? And it was just insane. So then, so basically from there, everything was fine. I ended up getting married with my husband in February. Finally, after like, I don't know how many years, we got married.
Like,
We
oh,
got-
yeah, we'll kid
About
together.
time. About time. So we got married. My sister and Rogelio were our witnesses that signed our marriage certificate. We had my wedding at my house. Like it was great, but Rogelio wanted to pick a fight with my sister, and he was being such a butt during my whole wedding. Like we went out to the bars and like my sister made comments like, oh, that's nice that everybody else's husbands has their wife sitting down and I'm over here standing while my husband's sitting down. And he's like, yeah, it doesn't matter. Like little comments like that. Like it was just insane. And then they spent the rest of the evening fighting downstairs, arguing. And like, I didn't even fully enjoy my wedding with my sister, because Rogelio decided to make a fight. So it was just so dumb. And then leading up to, I think, the point where my sister had enough, like during this whole time, I only knew of that incident in California. That's the only incident that I know that he has put his hands on her. Well, April 6th of 2015, my sister comes to my house and she's waking me up. She's like, Moni, Moni, get up. And I'm like, what happened? And she's like, Rogelio hit me and I need you to take me to the police station. And I'm like, what? And I'm like, I get up. I'm like, where is he? And he's like, he's in the living room. So he was in the living room of my house. And I was like, okay, where's Christian? He's like, he's with him. And I'm like, okay. And I'm like, and she was shaking and she's like, I just really need you to take me to the police, but I don't want him to know yet until we leave. So I was like, oh, it's fine. Like, I'll put on my clothes and we'll go and I'll say we're going to the store. He's like, okay. So I get up, my husband's there, and he's just like, what's going on? Like, my husband said he was mad. Like, he wanted to go out there, but my sister was like, no, just like stay here. Let us just leave. And so we get up and Rogelio's following us outside. Like, where are you going? Where are you going? And my sister's like, oh, I was like, I'm going to the store. I had to go to the store. And I get her in the car and he's like, well, me and Christian are going to be at my sister's house. And she's like, okay, that's fine. So we go to the cops and I'm like, what happened? And she tells me that they were having an argument in the room and Christian was sleeping and he got on top of her and started choking her. And I was like, what? He goes, yeah, he started choking me. And she's like, and I started to like see black and I started to see little dots. And she's like, she didn't say that, but she was just like, I started to feel very weak. And she's like, but then Christian cried and he got off of me. And she goes, and I had my phone on the side of like the bed and I grabbed it and I ran to the bathroom and she called my dad. My dad told her to get to me or call the cops. And so the thing that makes me mad is that Rogelio's brothers were in the living room. And my sister said that she knew she was yelling super loud. And for them not to even step into the room to see what's going on, like that was what made me mad. But my sister asked Rogelio's younger brother if he could drive her to my house. And Rogelio comes out and was like, where are you going? He's like, my sister's house. And he's like, I'll take you. And she goes, fine, just I need to get to my sister's. So then Rogelio, how he drove her to my house. And we went to the cops. She filed a report. Our liaison officer from school is a cop here in town. So he was there and he was like, what the heck? So he was taking pictures and I remember him asking her like, but did you feel like you were going to die? And my sister in that moment answered like, well, I don't know. And she's like, I just remember feeling weak and I just remember seeing dots. And he's like, okay. He's like, well, the sheriffs are out and they're going to go arrest him. And she's like, okay. And she's like, well, I need to go get my stuff. And she goes, yeah, go ahead. If Monica can take you, then, head over there. So on our drive from town to where her farm is about like 20 minutes. And on my drive there with her, I was like, what the heck? Like out of nowhere. And then she started crying. She's like, no, Moni, like, this is not the first time. I'm like, well, yeah, the one in California. She goes, no. She's like, sometimes we would come like he would get so mad and we would drive back to the farm. She's like, and on our drive there, like he's driving, my sister's in the passenger and he's literally punching her head like this. And my sister said, she goes, I would just turn my head and cover my head. And she's like, but he would hit me. Like those are the times where he would hit me. And I'm just like, what the heck? I was like, I didn't know. And I was just in shock. I had no idea. If I thought he was cocky, if I thought he was arrogant, if I thought he felt like he was better than us, it never crossed my mind that he would put his hands on my sister after that California incident. I thought, things were okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so when she told me this, I was just like, absolutely not. Like, you're not going to go back. Well, we get to the farm and Rogelio's sister's there. And again, this speaks to the relationship they had with my sister. She was there and sheriff was there, and my sister gets out of the car and so do I. And the sister comes like marching towards us, and she's just like, she's not allowed on this property. If she's here and I say she can't be here, she's trespassing, right? And the cop was like, well, technically, yeah. And my sister's like, look, I don't want to stay here. I just want to get my social, I want to get my clothes, and I want to get Christian's things. And she goes, nope, you can't be on this property. And the cop had us leave. And I'm like, I was like, seriously, you're not even letting her get his diapers? Like, and no, she didn't let us get anything out of there. And so I was just like, whatever. And I guess at this point, it's like, he ended up going to jail. He ended up getting a restraining order, that he couldn't be near my sister, but they still had Christian. That restraining order wasn't with Christian. So they still had to pass Christian, exchange him. But I vividly remember that Rogelio's mom came to the house later that day to drop off Christian's things. And she was just like, oh, mija, like, pues ya estás casada, like, you're married. Ahorita lo único que podemos hacer nosotras es aguantar. Like, all we can do is suck it up, for the sake of our kids. And my sister's like, well, for the sake of my kid, that's exactly why I'm not, is what my sister said to her. And I'm like, I'm in the background because I'm not saying anything. I'm just standing behind her and I'm like, clapping away. Like, you go, girl. So I'm just like, yeah, well said. So during that time, Rogelio would come park across the street from my house because there's a big parking lot, and then I would go take him Christian, and then I would go grab Christian. My sister wouldn't come outside. A couple of days passed, then my sister would just step outside and be outside watching and stuff like that. It got to a point where obviously I still have like my job. My sister didn't know how to drive. I feel like a lot of people were like, why was she trying to find rides? Well, she didn't know how to drive. She was scared to drive. So she was like, that was her obstacle. She didn't have a car because she didn't know how to drive and she didn't have a license. So then it got to a point where Rogelio started talking to me and started saying like, I miss your sister. How are we going to be able to, like, I want to make this work. I'm going to go to VAs, like, for the therapy and blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, well, I understand. I'm like, I understand, that things happen. I was like, but you're going to have to give her time and you're going to have to get a lot of therapy. I'm like, I don't think you guys are going to be getting together anytime soon. I was like, because what you did was not okay. And he's like, yeah, I know, but I just need her to know that, I'm so sorry and stuff like this. And at that point, also, my sister told me that Rogelio grew up in a household with domestic violence. This was his normal. And my sister was trying to, I think she took it upon herself to try to fix the situation because she tried to make sure that Rogelio fixed his relationship with his dad and blah, blah, blah. So I now understand maybe like that situation, but at that point I was just like, if you saw it, why do you continue it, So anyways, like, that was the whole thing. He's like, I just need a lot of therapy, this and that. I'm like, well, you're going to have to really work on yourself. But as of right now, you guys need to learn how to parent apart. My sister got a promotion, so she was excited. She was going to be able to afford a place of her own. She was going to make good money. She didn't have to rely on anybody else to be able to provide for herself and for Christian. So she was excited. She was excited to finally be at a place of peace. And she was done with the relationship. She was done. So then, Rogelio was picking up my sister from work when they would exchange Christian, and he would take her right home. And I told her, I'm like, if he's going to pick you up, I need you home right away. It takes 5 minutes to get from your job to my house. I'm in a cow. And she's like, okay. So then that was the first time. The second time, she's like, hey, we're going to go talk a little bit. And I'm like, okay, are you sure? She's like, yeah. And literally, I don't know if it was gut instinct, if it was just, I don't know what, but I even thought, like, I hope this guy doesn't get mad and drives the car into the river. We live right by the Missouri River. And that was a thought, literal thought that went in my head. And I was like, no, he wouldn't, because Christian's in the car. Like, he wouldn't. I'm like, stop thinking that way. Stop thinking that way. So I let that thought go. And unfortunately, then I believe 3 days later, it was Saturday going into Sunday night. I get a knock on my door around 4 a.m. And I literally, what I said to my husband, and I was like, fucking Viva forgot her key. And I was like, go open the door. And he's like, oh, okay. So he gets up and I was like, she forgot her key. I was like, okay. And so he gets up and he goes and opens the door and then I hear a man's voice. And they're like, is Monica here? And my next thought was like, freaking Viva and Rogelio got caught together. They violated that restraining order. She's in jail. I'm like, God. And so I like hurry up and change. Yeah, like I hurry up and change and I run out to the living room and it's two cops and another guy. They come into the living room and I'm like, oh, so yeah, what's up? And they're like, oh, are you Monica? And I'm like, yes. And they're like, okay, so earlier, they're like, we don't know how to tell you this. They're like, Margarita and Rogelio were in a domestic dispute. And I'm like, yeah, I know. Thinking they were talking about April 6th. And I'm like, oh yeah, I know. And then he's like, no, like she didn't make it. And when they said that, um, us growing up watching novelas, I'm like crying. I start crying immediately. But then I'm like, wait, wait, what? And like, what are you talking about? Like, hold on. And they say it again. They're like, well, Margarita and Rogelio were in a dispute earlier this morning and Margarita didn't make it. And my world crashed. Like my world crashed. I was like, what do you mean she didn't make it? And I remember they asked me, they're like, yeah, I'm so sorry. Is there anybody you can call? And I was like, no, there's no one I can call. She's the only one I have. At that point, my parents were in Texas. My siblings are in Texas. I have no family here besides my sister. Like my sister's my only one. And I'm like, no, there's nobody. And they're just like, anybody. And I was like, no. And so finally, after thinking, my pastor has been with me since 2010. I'm like, he lives across the street. Can you go get him? And I just remember thinking in that moment, like crying, and I'm like, I cannot be mad at God. Like, there's no way I can be mad at God. Like, Diosito, like I don't know why things are happening, and I know you have a reason for everything, and I don't understand this one at all, but I don't want to be mad. I'm like, please give me strength to get through this. And I had to call my mom. I had to call my dad. I had to tell them. I, live with that, the cries and the yells from calling them. Even to this day, my parents are scared when I call them a little out of my norm. If I call them a little too early in the morning or too late at night, they freak out.
They're concerned. They're like, wait a minute.
Yeah, hold on. What's going on? Yeah. So, I mean, that time was the day that my life changed. I remember asking, I'm like, where's Christian? Where is Christian? And they're like, well, right now he's at his sister's house. We wanted to ask if you would be willing to if we can bring him here with you. And I'm like, absolutely, bring him here. And I remember being scared because Christian was so attached to my sister and to Rogelio that I got so blessed the day of my wedding that he gave me a kiss, because he would never, like, that little boy would like, absolutely not, like, don't touch me. So right. I was so scared that he was like gonna freak out, because at that point he was still breastfed, like he was still breastfeeding. And I was just freaking out. And luckily he got there, he was sleeping. So I was like, oh my gosh. And by that point, news got out. I mean, news was everywhere. I stayed off of Facebook, but people were just calling my husband. My in-laws and myself weren't on speaking terms at that point, but that literally is what broke that. They came over and they were my rock through the whole thing. To this day, I love my in-laws so much. I do have family here. I mean, I do. I have aunts, uncles, my grandma, but I'm not close to them. Like, I'm not super close. My sister was my only person that I had. Or like how you said earlier, you have that one person that you go for everything, and she's gone. My person that I would go for if somebody else were to pass, or if I was in this situation, she would be my person, and she was gone. So, yeah, it was the longest week of my life. Oh, when Christian got there, he woke up at 10. I got him around 6 in the morning, and he woke up around 10, and everybody got quiet in the living room. My house was packed, and he gets out of the room and he's like looking around because there's strangers everywhere. And he's like looking around, and the minute he sees me, he calls me mom and he runs towards me, and everybody like gasped. And all I can think about was that while he was sleeping, my sister was with him, preparing him to be okay, because he has called me mom since then, and he has been so calm. He has been my calm in all of this. So I truly believe my sister visited him before she left. And so that's the biggest blessing I think she gave me at that, because ever since then I've been Christian safe space. He's my everything. And yeah, so that week was the longest week of mine.
I believe that. Like, not sorry to cut you off.
No,
like, that was like, I'm getting teary-eyed because I believe in those things. I grew up in a very Mexican family on my mom's side, and we sometimes it's intertwined with our faith. And you know, we grew up very Catholic, and for
Mm-hmm.
me, I do believe we get signs in the weirdest ways. And I'm not saying like churchy, right? I'm not going to
Right.
be a preacher to you, but I'm just saying I believe in spiritual signs, and I believe that,
Same.
you know, for example, I know it's not from a DV situation, but when my uncle passed, I was crying, like, because he was one of my other people, like he was like another
Yeah.
pops for me.
Yeah.
So when he passed, and I remember I said, you know, please just let my grandma be okay. And I felt this on my shoulder, like
Mm-hmm.
someone tapping me. And I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, he's telling me it's gonna be okay. Like he's gonna take care of my grandma. He's got her.
Yeah.
He can take care of her from where he's at. So like when you said, I think my nephew, who is now you're taking care of the parenting role, that is your son,
Mm-hmm.
um, may have gotten a message from his mom saying like you're gonna be okay with this person. It's really, really like it's a warm, sad feeling. I don't know how to explain it,
Yeah.
but it
Mm-hmm.
does get you emotional because
Yeah.
kids aren't supposed to have to deal with that.
Not at
You
all.
know, they're not supposed to have to deal with the absence of a parent at the hands of
Absolutely.
another parent.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was there, and there has been several signs. I know my only other sign that I had from my sister like that, well, a couple, but the biggest one that stays out to me is during the time that I was in the process of adopting Christian. Because my it's just a lot, like a lot. Before my sister passed, we went out to the mall to go buy her clothes for her new role, her new promotion and stuff. And we were walking at the mall, and she tells me like, Moni, if something were to ever happen to me or you, where would our kids go? And I remember growing up, we would say like, oh, with my dad, because my dad was the more like home stability type thing. You know, he owns his business. He always puts food on the table. You know, like he's very homey. At that point, he already had a wife. He has another kid. So naturally to me, it was like, well, with dad, right? And she's like, yeah, yeah. She's like, with dad. Now looking back, I'm like, maybe she wanted me to say like, well, I got your kid if you got mine, you know, like maybe, you know, that's what I thought. But originally we said, well, with dad. So when the whole funeral arrangements, I had said, okay, well, we're gonna have Christian here, but you know, babe, I wanted Christian to go with my dad. So during that whole funeral process, like Christian was getting ready to leave with my dad, and he did leave with my dad. He left for 2 days. And one day he called, like we FaceTime him. He started crying the minute he saw me. I was crying. I hung up. And my husband, God bless my husband, he's amazing. He looked at me. He's like, Moni, he's like, why did you let him go? And I'm like, well, because that's what Beba told me literally days before she passed. I'm like, I mean, I don't know. And then he's like, look, like, I will help you raise Christian. Like, I will be there. We can raise him. And I'm like, are you serious? And he's like, yeah, I'm serious. So we called the, social worker. I'm like, hey, like, I know we told you he's going with my dad, but, we changed our mind. Can we please go get him? And then she's like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, he's in the custody of the state. And right now in our paperwork, it said that he's with you. If you want to go get him and you don't want to tell your dad, oh, it's because we changed your mind, just tell him, you know, like, I said it, like that he needed to be here in the state of Nebraska. I was like, oh, okay, cool. We literally packed our stuff, left that night. It was probably like midnight. And we packed our stuff. We drove all the way down to Texas. We got Christian and we came back. And yeah, we were like, absolutely not. So then that weighed on me so much that she had told me, you know, that we wanted him with my dad. So leading up to the process when we were going to adopt him, because we had to go through like a really brutal like fight with, yeah, a fight with Rogelio giving up rights and all that stuff. And I just remember one time when I was dreaming, and we were at a campfire with everybody that was at my house during the funeral process, and my sister was there. And that's when I knew I was dreaming. Like, I knew I was dreaming. I saw her and I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, I know this is a dream. She's not supposed to be here. So I hugged her, and she's like, hey, Moni, what's up? And I hugged her. I'm like, oh my God, I just love you so much. She goes, oh yeah, me too. And I'm like, I just have to ask you something really quick. And she's like, what's up? And I'm like, if anything were to happen to you, I was like, would you be okay if I adopted Christian? And she's like, well, I mean, stop talking like that. Like, nothing's going to happen. And I'm like, no, I know. I'm just saying, what if? Like, would you be okay if I got Christian? And she's like, well, yeah, if he's super happy with you and he seems calm, then I'm perfectly fine with it as long as he's happy. I'm like, okay. She goes, but stop thinking like that. Like, come on, let's go take some shots. I was like, okay. And I just hugged her so, so tight. And I knew that that was like it. I was like, okay, she's okay with it. And then maybe like a month later, we adopted Christian. And so it was just, you know, those little things. Yeah. So it's been now 9 years, since my sister passed. Um, it's been a lot of people, you know, comment. I'm pretty sure you've seen my TikTok with all the comments and stuff. And, you know, everybody admires my strength. Everybody admires, the person that I am, but I had to go through it. I had, it's, it's a journey. It's definitely not a journey that ever comes to an end. It's a constant journey. I can tell you there's days where I'm like, go, 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 living life, with my goals, with my kids, with my husband, with what I, want for my future and theirs. And then I come to a stop and I realize my sister's not there. And there's days where I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm way too busy. I can't think about you right now, or I'll cry, even though she's on the forefront of my mind. Like, she's always there with every decision I make, with every thought that I have, with every situation that I have to go through. She's the person I think about. And so, yeah, there's times where I'm like, I'm sorry, like, Beba, I can't think about you right now in too much detail, because then I'll start crying. And so that's when I kind of push it away. But there's times where it just catches up, and you sit with the reality that your person's gone. You sit with the reality that this isn't just a chapter that's like, okay, it's a story, it's going to come to an end, she's going to come back, and we're going to be able to tell her everything and show her all our Instagram posts, show her all the pictures of Christian, show her everything. Like, it's not going to happen until, we depart. And it's an emotional thing. And I know that it's just, that pain feels the same as it did the day that she left. And I just, I feel, looking back, that I feel like my sister did everything right. I feel like she didn't last years in a relationship. She didn't, like, oh, for the sake of my kids, for the sake of my kids, like, she
She
saw
didn't
the
look
rea-
at
yeah,
basically. No.
she did. She filed a police report. She got out. She found a way to provide for herself and her son, that she knew, like, she will be okay. She was moving on. She was ready to co-parent. She didn't want to put her husband in jail with the first incident, because she's like, no, Christian does not deserve his dad in jail. He needs his mom and his dad. Like, my sister was so unselfish. She was so unselfish, and she had the biggest heart. And for the person that was supposed to match her in that and love her and love Christian, he was the total opposite. And he cared about no one else but himself. And he didn't think about the consequences that he was going to put Christian through. He didn't care about what happened to my sister. And outside of that, he didn't care about the consequences that now his family has to go through. Because I know probably being his family is not that easy right now. With the documentary out, it's circling all over our town. People shared my post. Like, I'm pretty sure they saw it. And then the fact that, when we adopted Christian, like, during that process, I mean, we did give them visitation one time. The judge ordered it. And it was with the social worker there. And at the next court hearing, the social worker said, no, Christian was too stressed. Christian was by me the whole time. He did not want to get close to them. He did not want to be around them. And they're like, it's just too much of a stressful situation for Christian, that no, he's not going to be allowed any more visitation rights. And from there, like, my husband and I, for the sake of Christian, decided, after we learned about their background, with domestic violence, with police reports, stuff like that, that I don't know a lot of, but I know by other people that they had a troubled upbringing. I hope everything changed. I hope they're healed. But up to this point, like, Christian, we're taking on that responsibility 100% of taking care of him, taking care of his heart, and taking care of his mind. When he's older and he's 18 and he's able to really, he's mature enough to make these decisions for himself, Juan and I have said from the beginning, we will 100% support him in any decision that he wants to make regarding his dad's side of the family. And any response that we give him is so neutral, should I say. My feelings are not involved in any explanations that I give to Christian when he asks. I try not to cry. I try to just kind of, stay very, very neutral to him, so he can form his own opinions and he can form his own thoughts around the whole situation. Because he got gypped. I feel like he got gypped.
And you also don't want to taint his perception of life, right? Like,
No.
I feel like that's kind of from what I've noticed, and I've had family members who've gone through DV, and it took a lot to get them out, like, more than just a few times. Some people, yes, just one time is all it took, but most of the time they say what, up to 7 times is the statistics of it. But if you're a child who's not being told, these are signs of someone disrespecting your space, your person, your mental, your everything. This is a signs of it. Then you're not going to be aware. You're not going to see the signs, especially if it's not in your family. You don't see it in your household. You don't experience it. But then you have other people on the other side of the aisle, like Rogelio's family, who did have domestic violence in their family. They did have issues that were going on, but yet from what it seems like, they all are okay with it, because how are you going to, men being in a different room, hear a woman struggling to essentially breathe air, and you do nothing?
Exactly.
You did nothing. And then from the discussions you and I had, the sisters no cantan muy mal las rancheras tampoco. Like they're also the same, where they do nothing. And us as family members, I know we love our family members. I know we will do anything to protect them. But what's wrong is wrong, and what's right is right. And we need to put a place where you can't do this to someone. I know you're my brother, and I know that that's your wife, but no, stop right here. We're not allowing it.
Exactly.
And
And as a
that's the
mom of, yeah, and as a mom of three boys now, I have three boys. I'm like, God, why are you only sending me boys? I'm like, well, I guess it's to break that chain because there's no way. Like my kids know better. They know. Well, my not my youngest. My youngest is barely starting to questions like, so where's the Abeba? Where's she at? And I'm like, homeboy, she's up in heaven. She was taking care of you before you got sent to me. She's like, oh, okay.
right.
So I mean, but I think as parents, we really do need to take on that responsibility to not. I think back in the day, it was a lot, it was shameful. It still is. I think a lot of people are embarrassed. That's why they don't speak about it. And I
Yeah.
think that, back then it was like, oh, no, like whatever happens in the door, like in the house, you don't say, like, and I think that's where that term came up. Like what happens behind closed doors stays behind closed doors. And now it's like, no, like, you don't know how other people are raising their kids. You don't know what your kids' future spouses are going, like what they had to go through. And I think that's why Juan and I are very like trying to stay neutral because nowadays there's so much, like we grew up with so much trauma, like people have different traumas, people have different, mental health issues and stuff like that, and you can't protect them from everything, but you can try your best to make sure that you're not the reason for one of their traumas, and I feel like if I was how if my personality was the way that it used to be prior to my sister passing, where I was so careless, very emotion driven, like my responses and stuff like that, I think Christian would have a totally different upbringing. Unfortunately, not a good one because I was so careless. But losing my sister and taking on that responsibility definitely made me mature, definitely made me go into a different mental space. And I took on that responsibility 100%. Like I live life for both me and my sister. I make every decision thinking of what would my sister want for her son. I take on every goal, every conversation. Like I feel like this huge responsibility to honor her in every way that I can. And up to this point, I feel like I've been doing a pretty good job, but there's days where, you really question if you're doing the right thing, to honor her. And, sometimes I'm like, Beba, I really need your advice. Can you please just show up in my dream somehow? Like, I really need to see you.
Right. I feel like earlier this week, there was a different video on TikTok. Someone was talking about grief. They lost their two family members within a 3-month period. So it was like the smallest thing. And I think that when it's a different situation, such as something like this, you lose them unexpectedly in a way that's so traumatic that it's very hard. So you do kind of, and I always say, I'm not going to question anyone's grief. I used to write letters to my uncle on Facebook. I would talk about emotional
Yeah.
people. I would go on not like in DMs. No, I would go on his wall and I would go right there and be like, I miss you. This happened today and things like that. And then my mom told me not to, but my mom and I grieve very different. So my mom is more so of she wants to be by herself. I didn't want to be alone. I don't want you to talk to me. I just don't want to be physically alone.
Yeah.
And I couldn't help it. And I was like, now I feel like I can't because that's bothering her and that's her brother. I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So then I started writing him directly in the DMs, but then that got found out and they're like, you can't do that. You need to let them move on. So then I felt very silenced and that hurt more than anything.
Yeah.
And I felt that I needed to kind of get cured of that. So I just started to write in a journal because I didn't want to project that pain into the future nieces and nephews and kids and stuff like that because they are susceptible to your emotions. But I think the way that you're doing things, I have looked at your TikTok videos just to get a sense of who you are. And I found like you are the type of person that we see in normal everyday society. And I don't think that you would be doing her any disservice, especially because you are raising probably the most precious thing that she had in this world, which is her son.
Yeah.
Because everyone holds something dear, but her child was honestly, from the documentary and from speaking with you, that was her everything.
Oh yeah.
That's her reason for being. And I really think that you're doing the best that you can with what you have. It's a hard situation because they're going to have questions. They're going to want to know things, but you being, like you said, neutral, I think that makes it easier. But we also have to, and I want to ask, because you have boys, do you make sure that your boys know that it's not okay for someone to physically, emotionally, spiritually, financially, technologically wise abuse them? Like, do you let them know that that's not okay for someone to put their hands on them and things like that?
Yeah, so I think I became like helicopter mom, unfortunately, because my oldest son, he's 15, and he doesn't have a phone. I mean, he does, but he doesn't. Because again, we know how technology is. I remember how I was with technology back when I was his age, and yeah, no, that's scary. And so, we give him his phone. We have all those limits. Like, people can say like, y'all are strict and this and that. Like, how can you? But it is what it is. Like, my husband and I have both mutually agreed to that, because we know how impressionable they are. We know what, if a girl, like, or if anybody, a friend, a girl, a girlfriend, whatever, tells them like, I'm going through this, and my kids don't know how to handle those emotions because they've never been in those emotions, like, they can easily get manipulated into taking on the other person's issues as their own, and they're not. And so we try to protect them from social media. My kids don't have social media. They're on my social media because I can see everything. But other than that, like, they don't have their own. Even Christian's like, dude, am I going to have to wait till I'm 15 to have a phone? I'm like, pretty much, guy. And my little 6-year-old is like, but what about me, bro? Like, I'm like, no, you're too little. So, I mean,
Right.
they know that. And my son was in a situation, my oldest son, with a girlfriend, and the homegirl slapped him, I guess, because they had broken up. And I told Damien, I'm like, absolutely not. I'm like, you are not going to be, I was like, that is, first of all, that's not a healthy relationship, because once that boundary is crossed, I'm like, there's no going back. I'm like, that is a loss of respect. That is, I was like, even if you're the boy in the situation, I'm like, it goes both ways. I'm like, and just as much as I don't, like, you are not to put your hands on anybody, girl or boy. I was like, you need to have that boundary for yourself. Nobody can lay their hands on you like that. I'm like, even if it was a slap, even if it was out of anger or because you guys are breaking up, I'm like, that is not acceptable. And that shows you that that person has a lot of growing up to do, a lot of growth. And he's just like, he understands. He's like, no, I get it. And, he's not in that situation anymore. I'm like, and it's not that you think badly of the other person. You just know that right now they are not maybe emotionally ready to have a relationship. Because I know at that age, if I was acting up like that, I wasn't emotionally ready, And, so yeah, I mean, we try, in our house, the kids, boys are boys, they like smack around, they wrestle, but I keep an eye on that. And I'm that person. I'm like, you guys stop it. Like, don't be playing like that. Like, get off of each other. But just because I'm so, like, I don't want them to think that that's okay, but I know they're boys. And I grew up with a girl. I'm a girl. Like, my little brother was growing up with girls, so there was no rough housing in our house, like nothing like that. So I'm just like, you guys, like, stop. You guys are stressing me out. But that is definitely a communication with them. Like, I talk about everybody's own mind. Everybody has their own emotions. Everybody has their own thoughts. Everybody takes things differently. My oldest is a joker. Christian is a sensitive, boy. The little one is just all over the place. Like, so it's a lot. But I know that for a fact, my husband and I are both very open about speaking to that. And I make it a point to make sure that they know. So when they're ready to get into any type of relationship, or they're ready to go out and not have mom right there with them, they can have me in the back of their head and know when to set their boundaries.
Yeah. See, I appreciate you coming on, telling us more about the story, because it made it seem very different. I will say, on the documentary, certain events like the whole going to and from work made it seem very different. A lot of the things didn't have as much explanation, I would say, or detail as to what was going on. So I'm glad that I was able to talk with you, because I did have those questions of like, what was your upbringing like? Did you have those things? Did you like, what was it that she didn't get the opportunity to see? And now it kind of makes it clear that, one, you guys had a good household, even after, it seems like after you guys had the separation of parents, you guys still both love your parents. Your parents are still very supportive.
Yes.
And so it doesn't feel like that was that much of a rift, but it just goes to show an abuser will be an abuser because they're good at manipulating a situation. He more than likely knew this person's going to try to see what their father is like in me. So let me project that. And then, I didn't mean to do it. It was a one-time thing. It's never going to happen again, but then still do it. And then you have family members that don't help, like his family, like his suegra, like, ya que, estás casada, tienes hijos. Like, no, we need to get rid of that mentality. And I do want to say that, like, the Latino community, don't do that. Don't do that. No obligas a alguien a quedarse en su casa cuando no es una situación agradable. Like, you should not try to get someone to stay in the home when you know it's not a good situation. Don't do that.
And, feeding off of that, again, like, our household wasn't like that, because when my parents did separate, my mom sat me down. I remember when she decided to, that the situation wasn't good anymore for her and my dad, she sat me down and she's like, I'm sorry, mija, but, I'm going to have to get a divorce from your dad. And I'm like, I don't remember I just remember sitting there with her, but I remember her words saying, like, I'm not going to be like those other women that stay in an unhealthy relationship for their kids. Like, you guys are grown, you guys are going to grow up, and I am not going to stay in this relationship. You guys are old enough to understand that your dad's happiness and my happiness should be first and foremost to make sure that you guys are happy. And so that stuck with me up to this day. Like, there's no way that I will stay in a situation if I'm unhappy because my kids will see that. And so my mom, for the sake of her kids, to make sure that they didn't see her unhappy or my dad unhappy, she's like, I'm not going to stay in this. And I think, and I'm pretty sure she had these conversations with my sister, you know, when they lived together and stuff like that, that's why my sister was like, enough, like how her suegra said, oh, por los hijos. And my sister was like, no, exactamente por mi hijo, no me voy a quedar en esta situación. So like,
Yeah, I think that that's the one thing I want people to like really listen to, because I know too many of them that will be like, well, for my kid, no, your kids deserve better. They deserve to see a mom that's being treated with love and respect and with dignity, and they deserve to see, even if it's a father, the roles are reversed. They deserve to see the parent being treated with love, respect, and dignity. And just know, because I know that, you know, we did talk about this, there are options for you. There are resources for you, educational locations where you can be to in like kind of like in the midst of getting somewhere safe. There are those resources. They're far and few between. We need to do better as a country to get those resources available to the people, and we need more conversations like this where people can speak out about their siblings' stories, because you're essentially the survivor of someone who didn't get to tell their story, because you get to tell their story. And I do want to say right now, because, you know, it was lovely speaking with you. Maybe we can do this again, especially during women's month, because I think it's very important to have these conversations. Or if we want to do an event later, we can. You'll always be welcome back,
thank you.
even if it's for something fun. But the GOP right now in our country, this is important when it comes to domestic violence. They are trying to get rid of non-fault divorce, which essentially Margarita Beba would have been able to apply for. And Nevada, this is very important, your state is an automatic non-fault divorce. So if you think that you're going to be able to have that with Project 2025 coming or Agenda 47, which both of those are GOP propositioned legislations that will be put into place, non-fault divorce will be eliminated, meaning that people who are going through spousal abuse, domestic violence, any type of partner abuse, they will have a more difficult time of getting a divorce. Essentially, it would make it impossible. So you would not be able to leave an unhealthy situation. And that is something that I want you to think of. I will never tell you who to vote for, but what I will tell you is to vote for whom you want to see safe. I don't want other Margaritas to be in the world. I don't want other Bebas to be in the world. I want them to be able to live in this world, not just to be a name. I want them to be able to actually be a physical being that can enjoy their children, their sisters, their family. And in order for us to do that, we have to make more possibilities for them to be safe. And we have to educate those who are doing the hurting. We have to make sure that they are stopped early on. So that way other people can get the opportunity to actually live their life. And in saying that, I do want you guys to call the phone number 1-800-799-7233 if you are someone in need of assistance to get out of an abusive situation. Okay, so that is 1-800-799-7233. Any thoughts that you want to leave us with? Any statements that you wish that you could say to someone in that situation, or even Rogelio's family? Anything along those lines?
Nothing to Rogelio's family. Don't have much to say, but to people in those situations, I know it's hard listening to other people tell you to get out, or, you know, you deserve better. But all I can tell you is maybe a step that you can take is pick up a personal development book, work on your mindset. That will give you the strength to know that there is better in the world, that you are not limited to those four walls in your home, to the people that are in your circle, that you grew up with. The world is huge. The state is huge. The United States is huge. And it all starts with your mind. It all starts with what you feed your mind. And I know that, how you said, manipulators are good at manipulating, and whatever they fed you, you can feed yourself something else. So if nothing more, if it's too hard to walk away, because that seems like the biggest step that you can take, surround yourself with positive books, read, listen to audios, and feed your mind. Because I feel like that will lead you to the strength to walk away and to know that you deserve better.
That's actually really good advice. I think I will look up some personal help books will help you understand the mind of abuser and maybe your own mind as well. I know that there's the 5 keys to self-empowerment. That's one that I used to read as a child. I will link those in the description. I will also link out Moni's TikTok page on the description. Go follow her. Go follow her on any platforms. Trust me, right now is a hard world that we live in. But if you have any questions for her, reach out to her, especially when it comes to the story. Again, I will just put in the description also the phone number. And I want you to know, Moni, that I am going to be donating $50 to a charity in reference to domestic violence, because I think that we need to also help with those organizations. They need funding. They're nonprofits. I will try to find one that is an actual nonprofit and not one that just makes money off of the name, and donate in Margarita's Beba's name. I think that we can all do that, and I'll also link that in the description so that way if anyone else wants to donate, you guys have that opportunity. Okay, donating can be anything. $5 is fine. $2 is fine. I will just be donating $50 because that's usually what I do for other organizations as well.
Perfect.
So it was a pleasure speaking with you. We're going to wrap this up, mi gente. Remember, like, share, subscribe, tell your friends so we can be friends, and then we can all meet other friends. Okay, that's the whole point of this. So, hasta luego, mi gente. Bendiciones.
Bye.
Gracias, mi gente, for tuning in to Let's Hablar Solita podcast. Bendiciones siempre. Remember, aquí hablemos sin filtro. Bye.